Hello and welcome. I am Trish Jenkins. I'm the coordinator of Alaska Book Week, and today we're honored to feature some authors, Anne Rearden and Alice Rearden, and Marie Meade will be joining us later. All three of them have played roles in creating books about Yupik culture, books that are featured on the Calista Education and Culture website. But before we start talking about the books, would you please introduce yourselves? And when you do, would you tell
Oh,
us a little bit about your role in creating these books? And also tell us how you met and how long you've known each other. Anne?
okay, I'll start. My name's Anne Rearden, and I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I've been working with CEC. It used to be Calista Elders Council, and it's now Calista Education and Culture since 1997, when Mark John first got it going. And I've known Alice almost that long. She can describe when we met, but I've been working as an anthropologist independently until 1997, and since then I've been working for CEC and documenting Yupik traditional knowledge. All that's why we have so many books on so many topics, because we've been doing it for over 30 years.
And I'm Alice Rearden, and I've been working with Anne since about 1999 or 2000. I started as an intern right after I graduated college and started out as a translator. And I did, Anne and I worked together pretty closely and with Mark, and we had a very small organization and recording elders, asking them questions, talking to them. Um, we started out talking about our traditional values and moral guidelines, and then from there we started going into other various topics. Um, and even though I became a teacher about 9 years ago, and that's been my main job since. I've continued to do translation work with the organization, which is now Jalista Education and Culture, and I continue to contribute to the publication of books based on what we've recorded from our elders in our region.
So if you browse the Chalista Corporation and Culture website, you will see a lot of books that you three have been involved in. You will see books that preserve Yupik culture and history, books that educate us about the culture and history, and books that argue for the values of the culture that might be overlooked. And I'm not saying books do these things separately, but you get my point. Can you talk about these books with regard to these ideas? So that's preserving the culture, educating us about the culture and history, and arguing for the values of the culture that might be overlooked. I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Oh, well, that has been our mission, to document traditional knowledge. And as Alice said, beginning with the moral foundations, what they called kanroyutak, the words of wisdom, the oral instructions for living. And really in all this documentation work, we've been following the elders' wishes. So when we were Calista Elders Council, we weren't part of the corporation. It was a separate nonprofit. We were taking direction from a board of elders, and it was their desire that those things be documented. And I think when we started working together, it came at a time when the elders that we knew in the early 2000s, who spoke only Yupik, they didn't speak English, and they knew their children were beginning to speak English more and more. And I think the feeling was that much of what they knew and what they valued was being lost and forgotten. And certainly young people were being educated in the schools, were being educated in English, and weren't learning the things that they learned in the Kazakhian home when they were young, before English became the dominant language out in Southwest. And it is, I mean, Yupik is still spoken, but English is certainly alive and well in Facebook and all the schools. Um, and Yupik is going down, although it's still stronger. The Yupik language is still stronger in Southwest Alaska than anywhere else. So the effort to document really was following the wishes of the elders. And it's really it's because of them that we've been able to do what we did. We didn't do it. It wasn't our desire. I always feel like we've been following orders. We've had good bosses. Someone who's not here, Mark John passed away this summer, and Mark was chosen by Calista, asked to be the director of CEC. And Mark's real talent and skill was he loved people, and he would bring people together to have what we came to call. I worked with Alice and Marie, and the first couple years that we met, we'd have well, first we had large conventions with 100 elders, two from each community, youth and elders meetings. And then we charged, our meetings got a little smaller. And finally, we settled on a method we call the topic specific gathering, where we met with 4 or 5 elders for several days on a topic. And that's where the information for these books came. And we found it was a great way. Those conversations were really what the books are built on. And it's what elders shared during those conversations that we've been able to, thanks to Alice and Marie's hard work. The gatherings would take 3 days. The transcription of the Yupik and translation would take months. And that's where Marie and Alice came in. They were there at the gatherings, but we couldn't, if it hadn't been for them, none of these books would be here. Mm.
And Alice, can you speak to the idea about what the books provide in general, the idea about preserving the culture and history and educating us and also arguing for the values of the culture that might be overlooked?
I think that the books are very valuable in that, when we first started working together, Mark, she wanted to focus on documenting traditional knowledge and sharing that with, the Yupik community especially. And he had said that, whenever we go and try to look for information about Yupik culture, it's very limited. It was very, very limited at first. And he couldn't find any information, during his schooling, in the libraries or wherever we went, there was not a lot of information. So I think that I look at those books much like a Bible, they're very much sources of information that people can go back to and reclaim our history, reclaim our culture, our knowledge, because um, we live in a we lived a much different life than our elders did. They lived in a time when our traditional knowledge, they lived by it. They lived it. They lived in sod houses, and a lot of the elders that we caught and talked to in the beginning lived in the qazgi, the men's house. They got to experience a way of life which is much different than, for instance, I grew up in. I grew up in a community that had houses and schools and churches and stores, and um, we had vehicles, we had snowmobiles and cars and all the modern amenities that you could think of. But our elders didn't. They lived in that time when they spoke only Yupik. There were no TVs, there was no radio station, there was nothing there. There were no school teachers in the community. And technology was very, very traditional technology existed. So they lived in a very different time. And so recording them and putting that information out in books or other ways, like we've done museum exhibits too, and sharing that knowledge with everyone, it's kind of, it gave me a sense of pride. It gave me a sense of understanding of our elders and the way that they lived. And I took that knowledge and it was like being fed, feeding my soul. And so I think that those books, that information that we've gathered will always be there, and that we can go back to it. We can look at that information Um, I'm always going back to the books. I'm always taking Qanruyutit, Yupit Qanruyutite, and using that in my classroom to teach my students the knowledge of our elders, the moral guidelines that we live by, and using that in social emotional learning. So as an educator, it's really important that these books are very important to me. They are really valuable knowledge that I think that our people need to hear and know.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, Marie has joined us. Hi, Marie.
Hello, I'm so sorry. It just slipped away from my mind. I mean, I saw the email. I saw it this morning. Then, yeah, I'm forgetful
Okay, you're
these
here.
days.
It's good to see you.
Reaching
Could you introduce yourself to everyone for us? Tell us about yourself.
I don't know who's all here and who's
Well,
I see.
Anne is here, Anne Rearden is
And
here,
Alice,
Alice
I can
Rearden
see
is here.
Alice and Alice.
And you don't know me, but I'm the one asking the questions.
Okay, so my name is Marie Meade. Akanak in Yuchtun. That's me. What else do I'm here in my house in Anchorage. I live in Anchorage. I'm from Nunapitchok. What else do you want to know about me? Actually, sorry. I'm a little frazzled here.
Okay, that's okay. It's okay.
So just, yeah.
Well, it's nice to have you with us.
Yeah.
Really is. So we've been talking about the books that are represented on the Chillistic Corporation website, and I just asked Anne and Alice about the books and how they seem to preserve Yupik culture and history, and they educate us about culture and history, and they argue for values of the culture that might be overlooked. Do you have any comments about that or thoughts about that with regard to the books?
They are certainly treasures for everyone that wants to learn and know more. I'm in that generation. I'm 78 right now, and so I'm my generation of uh, Yupiks. I know are uh, appreciating and and they're grateful that we have had these, how many years of compiling, documenting, and writing, and um, uh, our cultural our culture, um, and I know they're learning, and I've heard comments from different people, how they read the books and really enjoy and learn about who they are, their heritage, their identity. So we all benefit from these books. I mean, that's what books are for. Written,
Yes.
written. Once they're written, they're there for you. They're available. Many homes are. There's piles and piles and piles of books, bookshelves, bookshelves full of books and knowledge and
Yes.
everything. So I'm so proud and so happy and so grateful that uh, our we are also part of that collection in homes and
Yes.
for people to have and available, and for educators to have that resource to teach children, adults, high school, college. I teach here at UAA language, but I talk about language and culture are so connected. I mean, they're not separate. So as they learn words, as I teach words, I explain and talk about the culture. And yeah.
Thank you.
Mm.
So I have a question for the three of you, and I think you addressed this a little bit already, but I'm very curious about the process for writing the books because three of you, well, I don't know if writing is the right word, putting together the book. I don't know what the right verb is. I struggle with that. But can you talk about the process of how you three work together to produce these wonderful books?
It's been different with the different books. I could leap ahead to in the first books that we did, Wise Words of the Yupik People and Yupik Ganruyutait, that was really those were Yupik words, Yupik Ganruyutait that elders had talked about and wanted shared. And they did that in a series of gatherings, series of over years, over 5 years. And again, Alice and Marie worked with those transcripts and provided the translations. And then it was my job to look at the transcripts and try to organize them into a way that we could share them. So it's funny, we're definitely a team with Mark, who passed away. They're the four of us plus other translators, but this is the main core team, and we're very different with very different skill sets. But I don't think any one of us could have done this. It's a team project. We're working as a unit. And then after I organize things, I give them back to Alice and Marie to look at and to see if we want to change it or what we want to do with it. But that's for some of the books, that's the process that we work with. And I could add here that in my mind, and I think this was true of the elders as well, this information is the stories, they're being brought together and shared for a Yupik audience. And I've always said that, Alice, you and Marie are my audiences. I'm writing for you. If you think it's good, then it's good. But really, the elders wanted non-natives to understand this as much as their Yupik fellows, because I know Paul John and others that have gone now always said that non-natives need to understand this. They won't take us seriously unless it's written down. So and that's been a big part of why we've tried to put forth all these books in different ways. The museum exhibit projects that also had books accompanying them, those were opportunities. Well, there's a good example, the exhibit The Way We Genuinely Live. We had a steering committee that came together, and it follows Yupik life through the seasons and the different tools and technologies people used. But they used it in the past, but they still are doing those same subsistence activities. So it's not the way we genuinely lived in the past, it's the way we genuinely live. And that's still, so it's still a piece of what, so that's a little bit about our process. It's different. We were going to, leaping ahead to our most recent book, the book about shamans, Angalkut, that will be out. Marie is supposed to come to the CEC office on Friday. So it's coming very, very soon, and we're really happy to share it. That book was very different in the way it came about. So we've been working together for decades. Then the pandemic came along, and we couldn't work with elders anymore. So both a book about Ichtidat, other than human persons, and the Angalkut were both opportunities to look back at stories elders had told us, some stories many, many times. Frank Andrews told the story of the Angalkut, the same story a little bit differently a number of times. And I'd heard those stories told, I'd read the transcripts, but we'd never done anything with them. And it was during that COVID epidemic, those were a gift that had been given to us decades ago that we went back and tried to pull together. And that, for personally, that kept me going for a number of years. And I'm so pleased that we can share it with people of all ages and nationalities. But if it hadn't been for COVID, maybe those would still be sitting in a pile. But that was a real opportunity and then again, it's a back and forth process. We look at the stories, we go back over the translations, and you're always learning. And maybe, Marie, I'm probably worse than you, forgetting. I I read a story, I hear it, and then I read it again, and I go, oh wow, I didn't remember that. So you're always learning. Um, yeah, anyway, that's how I work. We work together. But it's definitely a group process. It's not just one person.
Any other comments from Alice or Marie about the process? Anything to add? No? Okay. Okay. Well, one of the things that I'm kind of fascinated by is the focus on educating young people. So, like one observation you might have if you look at the books on the Calista Education and Culture website, is this focus. And in the description for Yupik Words of Wisdom, it says this: Yupik elders speak about their rules for right living, values, beliefs, and practices, which illuminate the enduring and still relevant foundations of their culture today. Can you talk about this idea, this book, other books, and about the rules for right living? I would love to hear about that. Like how you're educating them and what you're giving them and
Is it okay if I talk? The very first time that I worked with Anne, with an elder, was during the time when Frank Andrew and his son had gone to Anchorage and were building a kayak at the Alaska Native Heritage Center. And so Anne mentioned that Frank Andrew was there, and I was in my early 20s. I remember I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now 25. And so we went to go visit him, and Anne had brought her tape recorder, and they had given us permission to record. And we sat down, and I only had to ask one question. And I asked him, how do you raise a child? And he just talked for I was so nervous about asking any question because I was, it's very, I was very nervous because he's a very important elder. And he was a little intimidating to me too. And it was my first time really asking an elder a question because it can be intimidating. So I was happy he just talked and talked, and I didn't have to ask very many questions, but it just really amazed me how very specifically he told me how a child should be raised. From the time they are a baby until, into adolescence, he just talked about how a child should be raised, and that those were part of our qanuyutit, our traditional teachings. And many of them I had never heard before. Some of them I had heard before. But he was like a textbook talking, and I was just, those are the rules for right living. That's the way you were supposed to raise a child in order for them to grow into a human being who knows how to make good decisions and do the right thing. And so our rules for right living, that was really my introduction to maybe how an elder would talk to a young person. And I felt from that time on, I just was just, you know, these should be passed down. These should not be, you know, kept to yourself. They should be shared with all our people, and we should all live by instructions and rules, because he was very adamant about that, that there is a right way to live. There really is a right way to live. I'm sorry, my classroom just turned off. It does that once in a while because it has I know, but that's the right way to live. And he was amazing. And so that was my introduction to the rules for right living. And um,
That's amazing. Can you think of some things that stood out to you in what he said?
oh yeah, like for instance, specifically, you are not to take a child visiting from house to house when they're just an infant, because they become restless and unsettled. You know, these are very specific rules. Don't bring your child, because they're going to see and hear things that normally they wouldn't in your home, and they may, you know, bring home deceitful things if you bring them places to, you know, just very specific rules like that about raising a child. Don't yell at a child. You can just encourage them in the right way. If you yell at them all the time, they're only going to learn to respond to yelling. You know, just very specific rules that just stuck with me from that moment on. And I really had a lot of respect for my culture, and I just there are more adages, there are more rules for how you're supposed to um, you know, live with your spouse and interact with your spouse, your family, your community. It just, in every aspect of your life, there are ways of doing things um, that are the right way. And if not, they can be reprehensible. They can affect you or your community. So,
So it's about the big picture, not just yourself.
yeah.
Marie, you're shaking your head. Would you like to make any comments? Oh, Marie, you're on mute. Common Zoom problem, right?
I was just starting to say that thanking Alice for what she shared. That's rules for right living. That's what it is. I mean, we don't have to say more about it, but uh, she just said it. I won't add much, but there's so many rules, and for 40 years and years of recording and getting sitting down with elders, uh, there and with all of them, they shared about the rule. You know, what I appreciate is most is terminology, words, and the meaning that go with these, how you behave, how you act, um, how you live, uh, and grow. So, from inside the mother's womb, the teachings and learning, and for the child, that's where we all started. Um, uh, the learning, being able to hear and understand. Uh, so it's something that we practice daily. Every day we remind ourselves, be conscious, be aware of how you treat other people, your relationship, everything Alice was just talking about, just almost all of it. I mean, yeah, and we all We all, otherwise, you're going to run into obstacles and hard trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That's wonderful. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and focus on the book that's coming out soon. You said a book, you're going to get a copy soon. And this is, it's been referred to as, I believe, the Shaman book. I'm sure that you could tell me the title and say it in Yupik as well. So can you tell us about the Shaman book, what it's about, how you wrote it, what the message is, and so on? Yep.
And you're muted.
And are you talking?
I'm talking. Go ahead, Marie. You can.
No, go ahead.
No, I think to me, one of the coolest things about the stories when we looked back at them and went over them is that generation of elders, and we've mentioned Frank Andrew and Paul John and elders that we recorded. Marie recorded some of these stories back in the before the 2000s when we wasn't CEC yet. We were working on the mask exhibit, a Yupik mask exhibit, but that generation of elders who are gone now was the last generation to see Angalkut, to see shamans practicing in the Kazigi, doing their healing ceremonies, both in the home and then in the Kazigi. And they tell the stories of what they saw. They also tell older stories that they heard when they were young. And they don't just talk about nameless Angalkut. Angalkut is a shaman, but they talk about particular people, uh, they name them. So they're named individuals. So what we have been able to share in that book is a history of important and talented and special men and women as well as men who did amazing things. And it's a piece of Yupik history. It's not just a general, they're not just general accounts. And we're only able to do that in this book because of what those elders shared. So that to me is one of the sort of coolest things about the book. You'll learn a lot about very specific men and women, some of the fights they had, some of the amazing things they did.
So
Um,
so in this book, are you profiling different people or
no, I mean it's stories. It's all the
it's
stories that they
stories?
told. And the
Okay.
book is a bilingual book, so it's in Yupik and English.
Okay.
Alice and Marie spent really months, years transcribing and
Wow.
translating. So there's an English introduction for those that are English speakers, but the bulk of the book are these stories in Yupik and in English.
Okay.
And we talk, they have who recorded them, and what they said, what exactly they said. So,
What an
and
incredible.
and one other thing I could say for her, so for anybody who's listening and just can't wait to hear these stories, the book isn't here. It will be here soon. But if we have something called the Yupik Atlas, if you Google Yupik Atlas, you will see a map with place names, thousands of place names for Southwest Alaska. On the homepage, if you go along the top, you'll see a bar that says stories. And down on the stories, there are shaman and Ichtinkat stories. And there's a dozen some of the kind of most incredible, most wonderful stories from the book are being begun in English by the narrator, and then they're finished in Yupik. I mean, begun in Yupik and finished in English. So there are stories you can listen to. What do you call them? YouTube. What is that called? Um, um, what did we do? What do you call it? Well, I've lost that. Anyway, they're there. They're recordings that you
Okay,
can
that's
listen
great.
to.
That's great.
There's a word for that.
Alice or Marie, do you have things to say about the book? Your experience with putting it together or a favorite story that you have?
I want to say something really quick. Marie, a lot of these stories were told because of Marie's real interest in Angalkut too. And she really was so good in talking to our elders and drawing those stories out. I remember we'd have gatherings and then Marie just would ask about Angalkut, when we were done with our business, whatever, and the elders would just share with her these incredible stories. And I just want to thank Marie for her personal interest in that because it was kind of a taboo subject, Not everybody could break through and ask about that because some of us grew up hearing about shamans and them not having a good reputation and grew up with Christianity in our homes and growing up hearing that, stories that are not so positive about them. But what was amazing was to learn that there were good shamans and bad shamans. They weren't because of our influence from Christianity. We only heard about bad shamans and they had a negative um, they would talk negatively about them. But through the conversations we had from elders and hearing Marie ask the elders questions, that really opened up the book for me, opened up my mind about shamans too. So I want to thank Marie personally for having that perspective. And I don't know, I just want to say that. I think a lot of her questions led to this book.
So Marie, I want to hear about these questions. What did you ask?
Well, I don't remember, but it started out with a mask exhibit when I first started, when we started the project with masks, and masks are integral part of, masks and shamans. Shamans are the ones that are mask keepers. They're connected to masks, their work. So I didn't know much about it before that. So in the early 90s, when we started the project, I traveled to villages all alone by myself, Yukon, villages, and started recording elders. And right away, looking at the pictures of real masks, they knew exactly. They would recognize a mask. These are shaman masks. So immediately, I was like, my eyes. That's how my interest in, shamans. That's where it started. I had an interest about shamans before that, but like Alice said, people didn't want to even say Angalkut, the term itself. Had a bad connotation. So I didn't know anything prior to that mask exhibit project. That's where it started. That's where it seemed like everything opened up. When the elders started talking immediately about the shamans and the masks connection, that opened up my my path. Like a doorway to, they're the ones talking about it that helped me to go through that doorway to start and not be scared to ask. And so the Yukon villages were more the elders there because of the Yukon River villages are Catholic, the Catholic Church, Catholics. Kuskokwim, Lower Kuskokwim is more almost all Moravian. So people, they were different, open. Yukon River elders were more open and shared more the stories, what they, the work, what they saw, what they witnessed. But in the lower Kuskokwim, they didn't want to talk to me about the shamans. They were more closed up and didn't want to share.
Why did they not want to share?
It was the church.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Is that that's my, I'm assuming it's the church, the influence of the church more stronger there, more prevalent there in the lower Yukon. I mean, lower Kuskokwim, the Moravian villages. That's what I noticed. Yeah.
One theme I'm kind of seeing here from listening to you is something it sounds like you've learned, which is don't be afraid to ask. Because if you didn't ask, you wouldn't get this information, right? And that's courage. That's a lot of courage, I think, to have the courage to ask. Like Alice, you were afraid to ask the elder about raising children, and Marie, it sounds like you might have been afraid to ask about the masks. And I'm not sure if I've caught any fear from you, but I see that putting these books together is a lot of asking and listening. And that's really important. And I think some of us forget that sometimes. So yeah, because people have a lot to offer, but they may not dump it on you when you see them. You have to find a way to draw it out of them to get them to share their knowledge with you. And it sounds like you have done that successfully. So,
and I should add then, because both Alice and Marie, I mentioned the topic specific gatherings that we had. They were always, 2 or 3 days with elders. They were always in the Yupik language. And they were either Marie or Alice, and then sometimes more recently, Mark also, as he matured, would lead the gatherings in Yupik. And I was, it was fine if I asked questions. I'd think about things that I wanted through them, but I was not plying, that was not my role. And if it hadn't been for Alice and Marie being able to do that and being willing to do that, none of this would have been documented. I'm a good listener. I think that's my skill set, but I would be afraid. I would be, talk about fear. I just wouldn't do it. Wouldn't be able to do it. And both Alice and Marie were really expert, and because they were interested. I mean, that's always been my feeling, because you wanted to know. And elders, it was a sort of a common understanding that people didn't like to be asked questions. But that's not true. If they thought you were interested, if they thought you really, really wanted to know, they've always been so generous with what they've shared during those gatherings. And the other thing about the gatherings is Marie or Alice would ask a question, and maybe we often had elders from different parts of the region. But when we went to a museum, the Berlin Museum in 1997, and this is again before CEC. It was Marie and I and elders and Andy Pauken from the village of St. Mary's, and the elders were all from different parts of the region. And during that trip, an object would be brought out, and one of the elders would comment, but then the other elders were learning too. So it wasn't just that we were learning from the elders from other parts of the region were learning from each other. And I've always thought of it as like a college level symposium. It it wasn't a question and answer. It was a group of people learning together. And like I said, I was listening, but Marie and Alice were definitely leading the conversation. And it was that they were always really, those are special times to remember. We were very fortunate, very, very fortunate.
Do you, Alice or Marie, do you have any other memories of working on this book along the line of the theme of don't be afraid to ask?
Well, some elders, I mean, Frank Andrew, from the beginning, when I met him at a gathering here in Anchorage, he immediately said, I'm your nulachungak or something, a teasing cousin. And that he was my teasing, we're both teasing cousins, my Wichungak. And so from the beginning, it was open, it was comfortable. I wasn't afraid to ask him, talk to him, ask him questions, joke and play. I mean, that kind of relationship from the beginning. Paul John is kind of the same way, but it was a little bit more, more of a dagak from, to have this feeling of respect with fear, like afraid to get, asked too many questions or ask questions. But then it then we became good friends, and had this wonderful relationship, and we could talk to each other, and I can ask him questions, and they're all so. I mean, it's all in the language. It's all in Yupik, and 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 in between each other, like Frank Andrew and Paul John, they're not Iluaks. They don't have this Iluak kind of relationship, open, and they had this really deep respect for each other to when they spoke to each other. But some elders were having more fun and more teasing and could easily talk to each other. So yeah, so it all depends on your character and your personality too. Yeah.
Alice, do you have any thoughts about asking, not being afraid to ask with regard to the book?
Yeah, our elders are, I think that the type of gatherings that we had, the topic-specific gatherings, like Anne had said, made it a lot more open to sharing information. So sometimes it ended up being elders just sharing with each other, sharing stories, and they'd get relaxed. I remember one of the gatherings that we had, these two elders from the Yukon just took over and just talked to each other. I didn't have to ask one question. Do you know? I mean, because it would, but then I would, if they got too far away from the subject, I would move them back into the subject. But I think the way that our gatherings are, elders feel very comfortable sharing. I especially recently when we had gatherings about health, and health topics are very, very, they could be a little bit uncomfortable for people to talk about, but some of the people would end up crying when sharing. And that's how powerful these gatherings can be, that they can open up things that people had inside for a long time and never shared. And it and they were able to release those. And a lot of our elders said they've never had an opportunity to take out their knowledge or share their knowledge in years. And we encountered some of those, and our gatherings were an opportunity for them to talk to other people about the past in a safe setting where they felt comfortable. I'm going to say some of the gatherings where people weren't paired together were uncomfortable at times, but for the most part, they're a good, safe place to share information. And some of them would say, I've never talked about this, ever. And they share personal stories, funny stories. And then it takes some of them a long time to warm up, so they end up being the listeners. So it is kind of like a good place to share when we have our gatherings. And then that information later, of course, is put into a book. But they're very dynamic and just their own, they have their own power. Our gatherings bring out a lot of information that people don't usually share. So,
and I'm assuming that what you're talking about, this sort of is reflected in the book. I'm assuming that what you're talking about, the sort of the power of this, sounds like it was very powerful discussions. So I'm assuming this made its way into the books, or there's sort of I don't know what I'm trying to say. Because it sounds like it was a very meaningful, rich information gathering on the part of the three of you. And I'm assuming that this is
yeah, I'm thinking about the first chapter. I'm sorry to
go ahead.
interrupt. I'm thinking about like the first chapter where we're talking. I think it's the first chapter where elders shared about Christianity and what effect that it had on our ideas towards shamans and shamanism, as a people, which it was uncomfortable sometimes, but we asked those elders. I remember at one of the gatherings at the museum here in Bethel, we asked them, the meaning of Dunrangayak, which is devil, and how it came from the shaman word Dunrak. Dunrak was the spirit helper of a shaman. And so that term, the missionaries took that and made the term Dunrangayak, which is the current word for the devil. And so we had these uncomfortable conversations too, that really helped us to understand that, how things happened in our history, and how things like that can change how we view things that happened in our history. So these are uncomfortable conversations that we had, not all the time, but those were questions that we asked. I remember Marie and I asked those questions at one gathering, very directly. Yeah.
Wow. You were not afraid to ask. That's good. So are there any other comments you'd like to make about the shaman book before we sign off?
Can I have one of the most one of the most important stories that I heard in the beginning was the boy who, we called it the boy who went to live with the seals, but the elders call it the boy who the bladders took down with them away, and it had, the beginning was about a shaman. And I love that story when I first heard it being told by Frank Andrew, I believe, and then Paul John also told it, and then John Phillip also told it. So there were different elders from the lower Kuskokwim Coast and Nelson Island who told that story. It's not in the book, but it's in other books. And that I learned a lot from that story, and I believe Marie has more to say about it because she translated it really beautifully, and it's published in a few different books.
Mm.
But that helped me to understand the good side of a shaman too,
Mm.
that story.
Wow.
That story teaches so much. Teaches about the shaman and the work and the power and about rules for right living, and relationships, relationship between the natural world and the animal world and the human world. It's a very intriguing story. I love it too. I really enjoyed. Paul John told the longest version of the story. It was Paul John's version that I transcribed and translated, and I think it was with Anna Jacobson that we worked together to really discuss, what does this part mean? What does it really? What does it? There's so much deep depth in the different parts of the story. There's a lot to learn from that story, but it does start. It's a shaman part of it. It starts out with a shaman. Just what was just the common family, that sought out a shaman to doctor their was he born already? Unborn? I've been kind of been away from these stories for a while when, yeah. Yeah, and all these shaman stories. I can't wait to get a hold of the book and flip through it and remember. Oh yeah, I remember this part of it. I remember this.
Yeah. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts about the book that you'd like to share?
Another thing that I learned a lot from is how they were important doctors in our community, not just physical doctors, in terms of treating ailments and doing surgery, but they were also kind of like mental health workers. And when a person was in a state where they were going through mental illness as a result of holding something inside, deep inside, if they weren't able to talk about their issue with a person or even nature, a shaman would be told to go and draw it out of them. And the power, that they held, in that community was you know, they were such an important, they had such a huge role in the community. You know, helping certain individuals getting over not just ailments, but mental illness too. And not just that, but they were also the ones that would request through masks certain resources, or like wood or animals during dancing. So they were asked to request an abundance of certain things that they wanted during dance. And they were asked, that was a huge role. Imagine a huge responsibility. And then they would have somebody construct a mask to ask on behalf of that family or that community for things to be abundant and to have a successful hunting time or experience. So they were in every fabric of our lives in the past. They were an amazing, they had a huge role in keeping our communities, you know, healthy and also vibrant, and, you know, just they were the spiritual guides, I think. And people don't realize how important they were, I think, because they've been diminished over the years, their role. And they had a huge role in our communities. And I feel like this book is important to show people that what a huge role they played in our communities in the past. So
you must feel so proud of this book. It's all I can say. It sounds like it's a very rich, it has a lot to offer. And it sounds like a lot of work went into it. So you should be.
We are, I am proud. We are proud. But, you know, what Alice was just sharing is just touched inside of me that part that is mourning for that integral part, shaman, you know, our culture, when it's all intact and healthy, and from generation to generation to generation. And when looking at how things are today with our people, is that's the part just hit me, is that when Alice was just sharing that, is it's part of me. We need to all, as you big people, grieve. We need to. The book maybe will touch some people that way, I hope. Our people also, to touch that part way deep in the soul that is need to be consoled. And it's that just came up on me. Alice, I can hear you. I can feel you.
Thank you. Yes. Any other comments? Sorry to end. No, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, I have learned a lot here today. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I thank you, and I'm so grateful to the three of you for sharing about your work and what you do. I have learned a lot, and I think this shaman book sounds like something everybody should read. That's what I would say. So yeah, and you said it's going to be out soon, and that's also great. Well, thank you. I want to thank all of you and for participating in Alaska Book Week 2025.